Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for holding this hearing, and thank you to the witnesses for providing, I think, really important information. And before I begin, I do want to note, I know my colleague, who's not currently on the dais, but was mentioning that he hoped that many of us here who are advocating for this initiative, this sort of an initiative, are intellectually honest enough to employ these same practices in our office. And I just want to make it clear that we do. I have in my own office manual family leave, medical leave policy that mirrors the legislation that many of us are promoting. And I'll tell you why I do it. Because it's really good for the operation of my office. And I've had staff people who've been able to utilize it in circumstances that allowed me, a person who depends on the highly productive and really smart people that I hire, to be able to be sure that they're able to manage their family responsibilities, and that I can still have access to the expertise that they bring to me and the experience that they bring. So I do have that policy, but I do so mainly out of the interest of my office, to make sure that we can continue to do the good work that we do. I also, like many families, in my own family, my wife has a situation that requires her to occasionally have to be away from work, a medical condition that her employer has been willing to accommodate. And I'll tell you why they do it. It's because they don't want to lose her. And so I guess the first question, maybe Ms. Howard-Karp, you could give a little more, and some of this might be redundant, but and I'd ask maybe any of the panelists to comment on this. It gets a little frustrating when I hear some characterizations of this that would imply that somehow, if we don't have paid family leave, that the circumstances that require it will just not occur. Things happen. So, absent paid family leave, maybe start with you, Ms. Howard-Karp, what happens? What happens? Does a person just not have a sick family member all of a sudden because they don't have paid family leave? And what happens in the employment situation?
It would be lovely if this problem would go away in the absence of a policy, but we know that that's not the reality. You know, I think that the lucky ones like me are able to cobble things together, and it was at a huge psychological cost, but worthwhile to me, certainly, because my family was not in a position to walk away from a paycheck. I don't know many families who could just walk away from a paycheck. I certainly will say that my employer won my loyalty by leaning in and making things work for me. I stayed for another 5 years, and in turn was able to make things work for some of my own employees. From the employer perspective, you know, we've heard several times today about how expensive and resource intensive and time intensive it is to replace a staff person. And I think that for them, it felt like it was worthwhile to make things work so that they were able to retain me as an employee rather than looking to replace me. So my hope certainly is that it was a win-win situation. But I can tell you for sure that given the choice between letting my parents sink without support and looking at my family, you know, sinking into debt, it's an impossible choice. I have no idea what I would have done if we had been in that position, but I hope that nobody ever has to make that choice again. And right now we know that families are actually making that choice every day.
They're making that choice, and the difficulty with this discussion, and I know there's a tendency to want to assign a dollar value. I don't do this, but there's a tendency in this town anyway to assign a dollar value and essentially monetize every human experience that we have. And the idea that families would have to make the choice in order to take care of their own families, to meet their responsibilities, to make the choice to not be able to be there when a parent or another loved one is dealing with the most difficult time, and maybe a time that could never be recovered. Those moments toward the end of life. The idea that we have to figure out a way to put a dollar value on that is somewhat offensive to me. I think as a society we're better than that, and I think it's okay for us to pursue policy that says that is a value that we ought to try to protect. wonder if any of you might comment on that. Ms. Levine, you?
I think your point in terms of who are we as a society and how do we support our community members is a really important one. And at the same time, I do understand that businesses and individuals are thinking about the dollar and cents of their lives. And so in what we've put together in our policies and in Washington State that I do think can scale on a national basis is something that really blends all of what you're saying, where it cares for individuals in a very holistic way and makes it affordable for both employers and employees to participate and know that they don't have to make that decision between a paycheck or caring for their loved ones or themselves.
Thank you very much. I yield back. Thank you. Thank you, panel.